So yeah, I want to thank you. And
dude, thank you for having me on. This is great.
If it's cool with you, we'll talk about a bunch of different stuff.
Grill the shit out of me, man. But first things first.
No, it's not even like that. I just want to pick your brain about certain things because I think you're one of the coolest people I know, and so I got to pick your brain. All right,
we'll just end it there. That's the soundbite I needed. Thank you, Jeremy.
All right, I'll send you that clip later. Put it on your story. But so this is all real scary to me. Being like recording yourself, even when I'm by myself and recording myself, trying to get comfortable in front of a camera or trying to get comfortable recording your voice. Sure. It's been pretty scary for me. But when you look back, it's not even that a scary thing, No. I wanted to ask you, you've done some scary shit. In that you grew up somewhere else. Mm-hmm. And you moved pretty much, you moved out here to LA from Rhode Island?
I did, yeah, about almost 11 years ago. Okay.
And did you think about that move for a long time?
I think the greatest at least in my personal experience, I think the greatest power I had in that was it was actually a pretty snap decision. I had recently started playing music again in Rhode Island with a guy that I had played music with like years and years before. And the beginning conversation was just, will you play on my record? And I really respected the music that he did and him as a person. So I said, absolutely. Like that, this would be a lot of fun to do, great opportunity and whatnot, because I was in a band that was kind of on hiatus at the moment. And about halfway through making the record, which started in like December of 2010. So around like late February, early March, he was like, yeah, so I'm going to move to LA in June. And I think you should come with me. He had some contacts out here and some stuff that was brewing. And I had never been like west of Texas. And I said, sure, let's do it. So I think in my experience, if LA had been like a destination or a dream or something that I was working toward, I think maybe family or other bands or friends or all the stuff that kind of keep you rooted to either where you're from or a place that you've lived for a long time, that might have derailed or prolonged the move. But because there was like an intent and a project and like there was something gathering steam, I just was like, all right, I attached myself to this thing quickly. Let's just see this through. And it ended up being like one of the best decisions in my life.
That was like 3 months, right? So from December to February and then bam.
Yeah, it was just, let's go. So there was little thinking to do.
No thinking. I mean, that's a good quality to have. I wish I had that quality, because if I was in your situation, it would have taken me like, 5-10 years. And I'm sure that happens to a bunch of people, So are you like that with everything else? You got an idea and you get an idea, or you have a thought and you kind of like, you make it happen quickly,
at that point, because I was sort of attached to someone else's train in a way, like them moving to LA and it was their project, and it was a band, but really like I was doing a little bit of songwriting, but for the most part, this was like someone else's vision. Attaching myself to someone else's sort of, movement was easy at the time. I was young, I was in like my mid-20s. Now, if it's something that I am like leading because a lot of the stuff I do now, like I kind of do a lot of it in house. I'm definitely more methodical, probably more anxiety ridden, a little bit more cerebral about the entire, like the intent and the experience and all those things, whether it's a project or anything. Back then, I think I was just looking to get out of Rhode Island. So it's like, what's going to get me to another place to do some hopefully some cool things.
What part of Rhode Island were you living in at the time?
I was bouncing between the capital, which is Providence, which I had spent a lot of time in like in high school and post-college, and lived there post-college, and my folks' house in Bristol, which is like a little coastal town, because I was trying to save some money before the move. Once I knew I was leaving, I was like, I gotta figure out a way to have some bank before I go across the country.
Okay, so Providence, is it just full of gems like you, people that are like into, you know, music and movies and like, you know, that have that creative force? Is that like a hodgepodge for people like that? Or like, I mean, you know, like what was that music scene like? And because for you to be like, I'm gonna bounce, you know.
Yeah,
you were playing a lot in Providence, weren't you?
I was playing a lot. I had been playing a lot in Providence with some different projects over the years. Providence is an interesting city because it's a couple hours away from New York. It's like a little over an hour away from Boston. And there's an Ivy League school there, Brown University. There's a lot of state schools sort of in Providence and in the surrounding areas. And then Rhode Island School of Design, RISD, which is one of the top design schools in the country, is there as well. So you get this mix of youth with a lot of sort of idea and artistic expression and in all different sort of realms. And then you also have this undercurrent of blue collar from parts of Massachusetts and Rhode Island as well, because Providence is a hub for sort of like southeastern Mass as well as Rhode Island. So there's just a lot of different types of music. I was in metal bands, I was in pop bands, I was in, you know, like pop punk bands, post metal, like all rock based stuff. So there's a lot of idea and I think a lot of talent in Rhode Island, and there kind of always has been. When I moved out here, I ended up meeting quite a few hip hop musicians, and not to just place them in hip hop, but that's kind of like where our convergence was, even though they listen to and work on a lot of different styles of music. Hip hop musicians from Providence. And it was funny enough, like we had never crossed paths. So even in a place that small, there's so much of a diversity of music and thought and art that it took Los Angeles to connect me with people that I definitely should have known when I was back in Rhode Island. Yeah, there's some gems, man. I mean, I wouldn't put myself up there, you know, that highly, but there's some great people.
Because I know you listen to a bunch of different music.
I do.
When you came out here and you linked up with the hip hop artists from over there, was that like when you first started getting into hip hop, or you already kind of like a fan before that?
Hip hop was kind of my, you know, other than being exposed to sort of what my parents were listening to in the car, which was usually top 40 or AOR or AM or, you know, just what was
What's that? What's AOR?
AOR is like that kind of like really relaxing, light rock and pop from like this mid 70s to the mid 80s, you know, like,
okay.
Yeah. Like, you know, it's like album stuff, and, you know, it's great. It's actually had a big resurgence. I would say like artists like, Tame Impala, Unknown Immortal Orchestra, like those dudes would say like AOR influenced kind of song structures and things like that.
Okay.
But my first real love in music, when I started to be able to purchase my own music in the form of cassette singles, I'm that old.
They're coming back, dude.
They are, was hip hop. I remember the first 3 singles I got were Cypress Hill's. Is it Insane in the Brain? Is that the name of the song? I forget.
Yeah.
I think that's the name of the song. Yep. Let Me Ride by Dre. And I think, which is still a great song, Freak Like Me by Adina Howard. And my parents, I didn't get censored. My parents just let me, they're like, as long as you get good grades, like listen to whatever you want. So
really?
Yeah.
That's cool.
It was pretty hands off. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
What?
I was lucky.
As a musician, where does that come from? How did you get into that? Like playing instruments and.
Funny enough, my first memories of making music, there was always music in the household. I do not come from a musician family. No one sort of directly influenced me, but I had some really good friends in the neighborhood, and I was lucky enough when I was growing up to have a turntable and an audio receiver that also had an A and B cassette. So my first forays into making music when I was probably 8 or 9 years old was taking the cassette singles, and if you flip to the B side, it was usually an instrumental. So we would put the instrumental in the A and a blank like 90-minute Memorex in the B, and we would press record, and then we had like 2 little Radio Shack mics. You could do stereo, but basically like one buddy would take one and I would take the other, and we would just riff, like either rapping or trying to come up with a hook or something like that. And we did that quite often. Those tapes still exist. They've been confined to a safe in my parents' house, so they will never see the light of day. But that was,
we got to get those shipped out.
I know we need to get them pronto. So yeah, that was my.
You got to surprise me.
I do. Oh, let me tell you.
Okay.
That's gonna be your next milestone birthday. That's gonna be your present.
Throw those on.
Throw those on. Yeah, just ruin my life.
So, no, I mean, everyone's got to start somewhere, and you're doing such cool shit now that it's only right that we get to listen to those.
It's
I was going to ask you, do you want to perform? Like, do you want to play drums, or do you want to sing? Like, what do you want to do that? Or are you kind of just like in producer mode?
There's definitely a part of my brain that will always gravitate toward live music and wanting to play live music. I think it got into me at a very young age, being in bands and playing quite extensively in the East Coast. I don't think that ever leaves. I think I'm a little bit more, going back to your early question about sort of like, doing things quickly or being a little bit more methodical about them. I think I'm definitely more methodical about it. I'm a lot more involved in the process of the production and wanting, to, depending on the project, have it be really close to the record and sort of just as large, or make it raw, like whatever sort of serves the project. But I do want to do that. I think when I was younger, we were racing to write as many songs as we could just so we could play live. Like once we get 4 or 5, we get a set, let's go. They'll give us 25 minutes or 20 minutes to open for whoever at this local show. Let's do it. And now I'm very much like, coming from that background and playing that way for so long, I want to play, but I'm much more sort of in my head about it in the process.
You've been on this, you've been working with your producer. Is it like a partnership? It's like, right? You guys are called Sweet Lads.
We are called Sweet Lads. Yes. How did you, is Tim from Rhode Island? Tim, funny enough, is from my hometown.
Okay.
So I knew him. I knew his one of his younger his younger brother. I knew his younger brother growing up because we played sports together. And Tim was sort of like this dude around town that would play coffee shops and bars and stuff. And he was a singer-songwriter and super talented. And we were kind of in 2 different circles. And I had met him briefly in Rhode Island. We never really hung out, but we kind of knew of each other and we had some mutual friends. And then he got into a pretty successful rock band back in Providence. And I think we might've played a show together, but we were at each other's shows and stuff like that. But we really didn't become, as close as we are now, nor talking about making music together until he started visiting LA. He and my girlfriend are longtime friends, and he had a job that would take him out here, so he would come and crash with us. And yeah, as far as Sweet Lads go, I handle most of the production. We write together and all that, but having done this for so long, our sort of motivation is, you know, to get these songs sort of like locked in as quick as possible. And I've just been blessed enough over the past couple of years to be able to get these things going in a timely manner, shall we say.
Let me ask you about that, because like, sure, every time we hang out, I'm always bugging you about showing me what you're working on. I feel like I don't really think about it, but like you always show me some new stuff, and I always feel like it's great. So
thank you. Thank you so
without even thinking about it though, it's like, how do you stay creative? Is it always just coming out, or do you go for a walk, you know, to channel like some creativity? Like, how do you, or do you stay up all night? Are you one of those workers? You know, like, at the same time, do you deal with like sitting there, not knowing, you know, which way to go as far as like making stuff up, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's probably a combination in some ways of all those things. I tend to now, I started playing guitar a few years ago, and a lot of ideas now generate from there, where before they would just generate from sort of a beat or an idea that I was just sort of building, and then I would play that in my head, or I'd take a walk around the neighborhood in headphones and just sort of come up with voice memos for like top line and vocal ideas. You know, I'll be at a restaurant and it's very annoying, but I'll be like, oh man, I just got this idea. So I'll like pop in the men's room for a second, like shut the stall and just like sing into a voice memo on my phone. Be like, all right, there we go. Like, you know, notate it and then, you know, revisit it later. But I've found over the past couple of years, especially as I've gotten more into the production and mixing side of things, that if there's not something sort of sitting there that I had been working on, like an idea or a motivation, I have a couple of tricks that I'll do to kind of get myself inspired. I'll either watch a mixing video of something that like I know I could improve on, or something I haven't tackled yet, or just something I find interesting. Or another big exercise is I'll pick like 5 songs that I'm currently obsessed with, and I'll narrow it down to 1 or 2, and then I'll just try to recreate a session that has some of those elements, or like the general feel of that song, just so I kind of understand how the production's working, why I'm liking the things that I'm liking. And I feel like that really helps to, even if I'm not directly inspired, like the songs just aren't pouring out, I'm at least like moving forward with the process. And there's always sort of like shit being worked on.
So you mean mixing like behind the board, right? Like behind
yeah. Like, and production and mixing for me,
not like DJ mixing.
No. I mean, someday I'm hoping someday, but you know, I have too many friends that are already so good at that. It's like a little bit, I'll, you know, peer over their shoulder in the booth sometimes. I'm like, nah, I think that's a different wiring of the brain. But, you know, mixing.
No, that's really cool though.
It is cool. Yeah, it's cool. I feel like mixing and production for me in the beginning were 2 different steps. Like, I create the song, I'm working on it, whether it was with the group or myself, and then I'd move to the mixing stage. And now I'd say like over 50% of the mixing is done by the time I'm ready to create the final mix. I'm just kind of doing things as it goes along. So
as you go.
Weird. Yeah. I think as we get older, maybe it's the same for you in a lot of ways with things that you do. Like, I'm always looking for ways to be efficient, but also ways to like connect things in my brain. So the more things I can get sort of like interlacing, I feel like the product is better, rather than I create this thing and then I get that heaviness in my chest. I'm like, oh, now's the mixing stage. And, you know, I have to, like, if I can get that thing almost, you know, completely sounding the way that I want, then mixing at that point is just fine tuning. And
Yeah.
And thinking about it from a listener's perspective rather than whatever brain I was in when I was coming up with the song or production.
Cool. I got to ask you,
Sure.
cause I was thinking about it earlier. I know you as Ryan.
Yes.
Where did Sur Chevvie come from?
When I moved out here, I was in a pop project called Cable Car with a couple LA friends. That's actually one of the people involved in the group was the guy who kind of helped me ship my life out here to LA. And when we were creating our second album is when I started to want to make some music, you know, tangentially to the pop I was working on. I wanted to try some different things. And I found myself gravitating. I've been using my name on every single project I had ever done. Usually as a drummer. I came up through music as a drummer primarily, doing a little bit of lyric writing and you know, vocal writing and stuff, but mostly just drumming. And now that I kind of had this other identity, I didn't really feel like that guy, as weird as that might sound. I was like, all right, there's a whole new niche here and a whole different perspective, and all this possibility, especially, you know, 5 years before I started producing, I had been making records on tape in Rhode Island. Like we'd been, you know, so dealing with computers and interfaces and soft synths and hardware and shit was totally foreign. And I was like, let me just create an identity, and then I can just do everything underneath that. I can put anything into the world, and it's almost like, it's like a cloak. I could put on the Sur Chevvie or the Chevy like mantra, and I can be that guy. And then I can just, you know, take the suit off and go and just, you know, be me, which is kind of helpful mentally sometimes. And the name just came from my dad's a huge gearhead. He loves cars. And growing up, he just had 57 Chevy, like Bel Air posters all over our garage. So as a testament to him, it just became Sur Chevvie. But writing SIR just kind of made me seem like a douchebag. So I was like, if I could just coach it in a different spelling, it'll seem less like, you know, like I'm puffing myself up.
Okay.
And I asked Hadley, and Hadley was like, yeah, it's cool. And if she says something's fine, it's in. Like, I'm done.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's it. I mean, I wish it was something cool.
Like No. I mean, really, it's just like, that's all it has to be.
Yeah.
And then once you make it a reality, it's kind of like the theme right now is like, just make it a reality.
Yeah.
Once you make it a reality, you can do whatever you want. It's kind of like how the RZA created Bobby Digital.
Yeah.
Bobby Digital was like his version of him being able to like do all the crazy shit that he could do.
Exactly.
And it's not the RZA, it's Bobby Digital. But it didn't work out. He just kind of went off the deep end with Bobby Digital, that he kind of had to like kind of let that person go. But obviously Sur Chevvie is the creative force here, the guy who's not contained to anything. You're into like pop music, rock music, hip hop,
everything.
Metal. You're a big metal head.
Big metal. I mean, I'm wearing a Mayhem shirt.
Would you say that? Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know what's so messed up about it though is like, I was talking to some buddies the other day about this, which is funny to just capstone that the Chevy point. I would say 50% of the people that know me in Los Angeles call me Chevy, like, or Chev or some iteration. Back home, they would never. They're like, no, fuck that. That would never happen. It's just not like, they could never conceptually. They're like, you're not that dude, and I'm like, that's fine. Like, however you want to think of it. But that same friend group is the group I grew up in. That they were the ones that really introduced me to heavy music and got me into it. And I think I had this weird heavy music cutoff point around 2008, anywhere, but like 2008, 2009, where I just kind of stopped finding new stuff. So even now, like, I consider myself a metalhead or somebody that likes heavy music, but I really listen, other than maybe a handful of bands, I really don't listen to much heavy music made after about 2010 at the latest. Yeah.
What is it about? Because I mean, I like it. If you play me some heavy music, I'm right there with you. I'll listen to it. I can dig it. I don't listen to heavy music just because I don't know. I don't gravitate towards it.
And that's
but
fair. Yeah.
What do you like about it?
You know, I think as I've gotten older, my idea of heavy music has changed. I've listened to things that are more tangentially rock or more experimental, and definitely less metal, as in like straightforward ahead sort of metal presentation. There might be like little mixtures of themes or musical context or whatnot. But I feel like once death metal bands and black metal bands and traditional metal, like once the metal scene started to really use the studio as an instrument as well, which has worked great for a lot of other genres, I personally started to gravitate away because I started to hear like a homogeny in the sound. Like a lot of these bands started to just sound very alike and very slick, a lot of hyper production, and it kind of took the raw power out of this thing that I love. There's still bands that absolutely crush it, and there always will be. I think that's that way in every style of music. There's always going to be people who just like they figure their sonics out, they figure their songs out, and it just works. And there's others that lean a lot on production and whatnot, and I think we all go through it. But yes, just something about it kind of, I lost some interest. But there's been it's cyclical, you know? So like Cult of Luna, every record they put out, totally on board, unique sonics, great sound. Daughters started kind of in a metal band, has become more sort of like experimental rock in the vein of like Jesus Lizard and some of the more sort of like esoteric stuff from the late 80s, early 90s. Along with some electronics. So I feel like I've gravitated more towards the idea and single projects rather than being like, I like this style of music because it's this style of music, which is definitely the way I was when I was growing up. I listen to metal and fuck everything else.
If all right, if you could suggest
sure
a metal album, something that you would take with you on the deserted island, what album would that be?
I've got one. I could pick one.
I mean, or I'm going on the deserted island and you have to give me one.
Okay.
Which one would it be? Like, yo, check this out. This makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, I would have to split it between three. And the only reason I say that is because I would have to know, I don't want to stick you on an island with a vocal performance, a vocalist that you can't handle, that you would just drive you crazy.
That'd be the torture that
it would be. But I feel like the musical elements would you would gravitate to them or find something unique and interesting. The vocals would be tough. So I would pick either King Diamond's Them, because the drumming, I mean, the musical part, I love King Diamond. The vocals are not for everybody, but I've been a King Diamond fan since the mid to late 90s. Iron Maiden's Somewhere in Time, or Cult of Luna's Eternal Kingdom. One of those three, if you decide you want like super crazy falsetto vocals, operatic 80s metal vocals, or a dude screaming his head off, pick your poison, basically.
Nice. I'm going to check those out.
Yeah.
I need to expand my shit. I'm always trying to listen to new stuff. So
me too. And you give me a lot of great suggestions with stuff that always blow my mind. So I appreciate that as well.
Thank you. Let me ask you this, because I think you got your head on your shoulders, You're a smart dude.
Try.
Let me ask you this. Like, I've noticed that everyone's putting music out. Like, a little bit at a time.
Sure.
One song, wait like 6 weeks, maybe even longer. Another song. No one's really doing the album thing. It's more of like EP and like delayed releases. Music's always changed. It's been changing since, you know, we became, since like, you know, early classical to now. I mean, it's gone through like, I don't know, probably the most change out of everything, you know, and it's still changing. How do you feel about that? Are you just kind of rolling with the punches, or as an artist, you're kind of just like, my job is just to create and kind of like, you know, put my stuff out? Or do you kind of think about that when you're making music, or, you know what I mean? How do you feel about that?
You know, I definitely appreciate albums. I'm still someone that will, as I know you are as well, I'll play a vinyl album front to back. A lot of times I'll take a few hours. I listen to at least a few hours of music daily. And a lot of times that will be album based, sometimes stuff that I love, sometimes trying something different. I feel like, you know, going back to sort of the quick point I made about technology sort of changing, especially my first few years in LA, with sort of the rise of bedroom studios and you know, being able to create something so in depth from a laptop or a computer with minimal gear. I don't necessarily know if that was like the mental intent or was intentional with artistry going to a more singular format. I'm sure it was something industry based, but I think there's this weird flow where for an industry, it's less expensive to push a single and give it a little bit more life during a smaller cycle, rather than the way it was back in the day. It was like you had a hit song and that shit was in the radio sometimes for years, you know, and it still happens. I think a little less frequency, but it still happens. And then also the fact that like budgets got smaller and people were making music from their homes, which put less money into maybe making an album, or less on the line in a risk sense for making an album. But it also allowed artists to be a lot more precious with their songs, because it wasn't like you were demoing, like if you were lucky enough to have a 4-track or a little demo recorder or something in your home and you're working on this stuff. If you're just in a practice facility, you know, for months or a year or however long, working on these songs, and then you get into the studio, you have a very concise amount of time and a high level of execution that you need to complete to get this project done. So with an album sense, if you're going to be spending this money, it is cheaper to block out a studio for 10 days and make an album, and then, you know, either have it mixed there or however that cycle can play out, versus I'm going to go do a single over 2 days, and then next month I'm going to go back and do more. Like, that gets real expensive. So I think it'll, with the budgets becoming smaller for all artists, and the level of time that you can spend on one song, because it's right in front of you if you're working at home or however the steps are working. I think production became more intricate and experimental across the board. People have been experimenting forever, but I think it became more expensive in that sense. And people are just, I think they're more precious about the initial product and then ready to move on to the next. So Spotify and Apple Music and streaming services obviously came into this. Kids that are 10 years younger than us, and then, you know, 20 years younger than me, maybe, they listen to more music than I ever listened to. You know, when we were growing up, you know, I had enough money for maybe one CD every week or every couple of weeks, you know, with allowance or having a job or whatnot. So like I had 100 CDs maybe when I left for college. And other than listening to radio, that was the cycle. I mean, those kids now listen to more varied music in one day than I was able to listen to in 1 month. So there's just so many factors that are, from the listener perspective and from the artist perspective, I think are making singles or short form records like EPs or 3-song demos or even just an AV. A good friend of mine, basically now, he puts out a single and a B-side every single time, which I love. That's like the old school way. But I think from both perspectives, it started to make sense. So when you have a real confluence between the people making the product and the people, you know, commercially buying the product, if they're both sort of in the same wavelength, I think it just makes sense. I love albums. I'll never say I don't love albums.
No, yeah.
But I think there are some artists that wholly benefit from it. And I think there are there's people just making so much music now that there's less risk involved. And, you know, if you go one way and then 3 songs down the line, 3 singles in, you try something different and your listenership goes up by like, you know, 1,000%, you're going to go, oh, let me take this new lane. You know, I'm not going to, you know, thank God I didn't write 10 fucking songs like this that nobody cared about. I put one out like this and everyone was like, to give like a super short anecdote. I remember a producer who worked with Kesha, who I won't name because he's kind of got a checkered past at this point, but was talking about how she sent him a demo CD, I think through her mom or something. Somehow it got to him through a label or whatnot. And he's like, the first 3 songs were these like hackneyed country crossover stuff or weird pop songs. And he's like, and the last 2 were like clearly something she was fucking around on in her bedroom. And they were like weird hip hop hybrid pop stuff that was just all over the place. And he's like, that's what I wanted. I didn't want the polished. I wanted the thing that I didn't think anybody had heard of yet. So I think that's another thing that plays in is when you're making singles, you can keep taking left or right turns. Some of them slight, some of them hard. And if it works, you get a lane and now you can go nuts.
That's interesting. That's a good point because you don't want to get stuck doing the same stuff over and over. So
it's true.
That could work out for you, you know, if you do it that way. Huh. Interesting point of view there.
Yeah.
And just like crank out different stuff. And you do that. So you do have that quality of putting out songs that, you know, one is completely different than the other. And that's just, you know, I don't know. I see it as someone who is a true artist, someone who's, you know, you can't, like when you start putting out the same stuff, it's like, you know, who are you, a robot or something? You know, I want to hear, you know what I mean? So, okay. I don't want to take up more of your time. Again, thank you for doing this.
Of course, man. Anytime.
The name of this show is called Drummers Untitled.
Yeah.
And what that means is like, you know, we just talk about random stuff, but it also has a central theme of, you know, being a musician, drummers, which, you know, drums are one of the most important things of a track, you know.
100%.
You know, if you don't have the drums down, you know, stuff, it just, you know, it could work out.
Gets a little,
yeah. So before I let you go, let me pick your brain about drums.
You got
and how important they are to your tracks. You know, do you go through when you're creating stuff? Do you go through just like you know, the snare sound for an hour? What's the most important thing as far as like laying down a solid drum track for you?
That's a great question. So I started drumming when I was 13. Not because I wanted to, but because all my other friends had already been playing guitar and bass, and they were so far along already that I was like, I'll never catch up. So my dad bought me like a drum kit from a guy he worked with who was a drummer. And I, you know, messed around, tried to figure out parts of songs that I loved and tried to go as fast as I possibly could, both learning and playing. And then I started taking lessons about a year and a half into that. And I'm super fortunate that I went to a traditional pop and rock and jazz drummer for my lessons. If I had gone to like a metal drummer or someone who was totally aligned with the music that I loved at the time, I think I would have probably been pretty one note in the way that I approached it. But like, you know, I was playing when all my buddies who were going for drum lessons were playing like Metallica and trying to play Slayer songs. I was playing, you know, I was playing Running Down Dream. I was playing like Stan Lynch, and I was playing Dave Garibaldi, and I was playing the Prince tracks. Like I came from this, and I would bring that stuff into the music. So like we were never the fastest or crazy technical band, but like we had a groove and we had a pocket and different elements of drumming that like, I'm so glad that I found this dude when I was that age, because he kind of helped me approach things more from a songwriting perspective than just a musical or technical perspective. And I feel like I kind of bring that brain to it now, where certainly when I first started producing, I was lucky enough to be exposed to a lot of different software and programs and whatnot from working in the studio and the projects I was doing with other producers, who then would give me sound banks, and I would spend hours cycling through snares and kicks, like what's the perfect one, what's the perfect one. And now when I get new software or even stuff that I've had for a long time, I've created my own kits. I've taken the hours of time to you know, exhibit different sounds and audition different things. So when I go to a track now, I probably use about 24 different kits, like actual drum kits. And then I have about, I don't know, about a dozen or so classic drum machines. And then I have some stuff that's just like really experimental, or I'll make it myself. Like I've got some synths here that I can create kicks and snares with. So I find now, especially coming from the melodic standpoint first, like usually coming up with some sort of melodic movement and kind of already having the beat in my head, I kind of audition what I want the drums to sound like in my head. And then I'm picking through a much scaled down bank of sounds, trying to get as close to the sound that's in my head as possible. Instead of being like, what's going to sound cool? I kind of already know what I want. And now it's just a matter of like matching that to the shit that I have.
Yeah.
And that just comes with a lot of patience. I would recommend to anyone who is using software, whether you're a beginner or super experienced, is like when you get a new toy, just like run that shit into the ground, like learn everything you can about it. And that thing will start to speak to you with whatever elements you're going to like about it. Because if I just approached every instrument that I have with an open mind every time, I'd never get anything done.
Yeah, I'm watching music theory videos.
Nice.
I don't really know the purpose of why I do it. I just like, I should look up music theory videos just to see what I can learn from it. But I want to learn a different instrument just because I feel like it'll help my drumming. Everything's always just like, how can it help my drumming?
And I like that.
I wish I could, you know, I wish I could learn to play the guitar. I mean, I play chords and stuff.
Yeah.
But it's always like, oh, this is going to help my drumming somehow. I don't know how, but if I learn this easy Beatles song, it's going to help my drumming.
Well, and I found that when I started playing, I mean, I played a little, I always was around guitars because I was always in metal bands and shit, but like my relationship with guitar was basically like, I don't like that thing. It terrifies me. I'm polyrhythmic. You know, I feel like all drummers, especially people who just kind of feel that, have separation of limbs. But like, I don't have super huge hands. So the guitar is always like, man, this is just a pain in the ass. And as I played more guitar, what I found is a trick, kind of going to your point of like always wanting to, it always goes back to how does this improve my drumming? I found as I became more musically inclined for the melodic elements, I started to notice in songs that I loved, which I always kind of like tried to be aware of, but didn't really know how to execute sometimes. is what is the relationship between the percussion and drums and the melodic elements, and why does it work? And if you start to kind of have those two brains of like, oh, if I write this guitar part in this way and phrase things this way, then that allows space here for this. Or drumming wise, if I create this sort of palette, that allows for space for this, like whether it's syncopated or whether, you know, it's melodic elements that have counter melody, or maybe the drums are super linear, or maybe they need to be more, you know, all over the place and kind of carry the track. So I find that as I've gotten to be a better melodic instrumental musician and producer, it really has made my drumming more impactful and filled with intent, because there's like a goal. Like I love, put me at a kit. I'm like you, put me at a kit and I'll, you know, fuck around for hours. But there is a satisfaction to listening to records that have great drums and understanding why they're great in a drumming perspective and why they're great in serving a song perspective. And it's so rewarding when you finish a song where you feel like you've hit both of those things. Like the drums are interesting and they're great and they sound great and the sonics are great, but they also serve the song to where if someone listens to it who doesn't give a fuck about drums, the drums are doing what they need to do to make that person enjoy the song. And if it's someone who loves drums, hopefully they love it too.
Right. Cool, man. You've shared a lot of cool points of view, things that make you special. And yeah, okay. Before we land this,
sure.
I'm gonna ask you a couple of questions, and then, you know,
hey, give me the lightning round,
you got shit to do. I don't want to keep you here any longer. This is already going a little longer than I wanted to. So
sure,
thank you for your time
I
again.
I could talk music with you all day, man. No worries.
So, two things real quick.
Sure.
If you weren't into music, if you weren't like, it didn't exist.
Sure.
What do you think you'd be like passionate about? What do you think you would be like having your time consumed by?
I think I would probably write. I would probably write short form stories and short poetry, or I would go, you know, it's interesting. The second thing kind of is a bit of a cheat because I feel like I enjoy it now because my brain is rewired, having to become a little bit more engineering from doing audio engineering and mixing and whatnot. But I think I would like try to own like an HVAC company or something. I find like,
what is that? Is
so
that
like heating and cooling systems? Like,
yeah,
especially for commercial buildings. Yeah. I just find that shit.
Why?
I just find it so,
you want to see your name on a van?
Yeah, that's it. Basically. Yeah. My name and my cell phone number and like some weird picture.
What is it? Is it because like, you're like, the wiring and stuff, or like
there's an engineering element to it, but I ran, you know, I ran a restaurant in LA for a few years, and we opened a second location at one point, and I had to be super hands-on with a lot of the elements. You know, the building was existing. It wasn't a full build out, it was a takeover, but we needed to redo a lot of the HVAC system. So I spent a lot of time with some of the techs. And I just found it fascinating, like air balance in a room to make sure you can open the door or it doesn't like slam. And
what?
Especially in like huge commercial buildings. Yeah, it's really, I just found that stuff so fascinating. I mean,
I had no clue.
It might be super boring to some. And I
didn't
totally
even know that was a thing.
Yeah, it's you know, it's not only scientific, but it's a real interesting method when you think about like engineering sense and civil engineering sense, and especially not to be, you know, fucking Debbie Downer, but as the world gets hotter and initially gets cooler, HVAC systems are going to be a really indelible part of human life. So I feel like ways, and the other thing to address that, you know, not to get on a perch, but like, I feel like I'd be looking for the greenest ways, the most environmentally sound ways to kind of approach these problems. And I just find trades and things like that to be really interesting. I didn't grow up in that world. My parents both had relatively normal jobs. My dad's a visual artist. My mom's a teacher. But I just found as I got older, especially getting into music and trying to understand sound pathways and signal flow and all these different things of how music is made. When I walk into a building now, I'm like, oh, like this was necessary for this to happen. And this is how the electric was run. And this is how, especially in a restaurant, like how all the Cat 6 or Cat 5 cables are run to make the internet work and all your points of sale and stuff. So but something about HVAC just really captured me. The HVAC tech that helped balance the room in the restaurant that we were opening was a real charismatic guy. And picking that guy's brain was probably as interesting if I got to pick the brain of like my favorite drummer. Like I was just like, wow, man, like this dude's worked in HVAC in like thousands of buildings. And I'm like, I can't imagine waking up every day, going into a location and being like, all right, what's the shit show that I need to fix today? And I give it a lot of credit. So shout out HVAC. Yeah, great job, guys.
That's crazy. And nice.
Not guys, girls, everybody, whatever. Anyone working in HVAC. Congratulations.
I would have never guessed that, man.
Who
there
knows?
you go, surprising me.
It might still happen.
Hey,
who knows?
You got me thinking.
Let's open an HVAC company.
All right. Hey, okay, real quick.
Sure.
Let me get your favorite. This is almost like rapid fire.
Ure.
All right. Let me get a book that you recommend to people.
Guns, Germs, and Steel by Jared Diamond.
Okay. I'll write that down later.
Perfect.
Documentary.
My Scientology movie by Louis Theroux. It's really funny.
No shit.
Yeah.
Okay. And song. I know you're listening to a song right now that's probably amazing. You always got them in your playlist, so give me a song.
Hold on. I just want to make sure I don't butcher her name, because I've been known to do that at times. The lips move faster than the brain does. Luckily, I got my phone right here. Too Sweet by India Shawn, featuring Unknown Mortal Orchestra. It's produced by DeMille. Oh man, what a banger.
There you go. All right, Ryan, I want to thank you again.
Appreciate it, Jeff.
Sur Chevvie, I want to thank you for putting out. Also, Sweet Lads, Here We Come.
Oh yes. Take Me Home.
You got a song out right now?
Yes.
Take Me Home. My bad.
That's okay. No, Here We Come with Take Me Home. Yes.
And that's going great, right? How are people receiving that?
Honestly, the reception's been fantastic. We had put out our first song just as like a fun little exercise, this song called In the Ground, and people seem to gravitate toward it. So we came out with Take Me Home. The reception's been great. It features a good friend of ours, a friend of yours, Glass Battles.
Yeah.
And we're currently, in the midst of finishing up song 3 right now, and hopefully putting together some sort of live show for the early next year. So you'll probably get a call, I would imagine.
No shit.
Yep. I'm retiring from the drum kit. So like, we'll make it work, but yeah,
hey.
Sweet Lads, it's been going really well. I appreciate the plug.
No. Yeah. I mean, anything you do, I'm a groupie. So keep doing what you're doing.
Thanks, man.
I'm sure we'll hang out soon.
Yes.
Let's make that happen.
Agreed.
Yeah. So dude, this has been great. Kicking off my show.
Congratulations,
I wouldn't want to do it with anyone else, really.
Oh, I appreciate that so much.
I hope that, we can do this again.
Anytime.
We could talk about, whatever.
Yeah.
But, so yeah, keep doing what you're doing. I appreciate it. I'm listening. I support it. Other than that, thanks for doing this. And, let's hang out soon.
Absolutely.
And, keep doing what we're doing. Thanks, man.
Yeah, man. Congrats on Drummers Untitled. Thanks so much for having me, man. Anytime, Jim.